7 days ago, the 2027年代际大雕大战，美国 v CCP officially reached a completely different level. Cause just 5 days ago, a bill was passed that grants America solo leveling, officially starting the development of space weapons, the Golden Dome.
It's over 9,000!
我跟你讲起来吼, it's a goddamn lie. Because Trump's idea ain't no dome, it's a golden spear. The Golden Dome is a straight up 21st century Manhattan project, yo. And if the Trump administration can actually pull it off, the help it brings Taiwan could be beyond your imagination. And now the CCP and Xi Jinping are pissed because the end result could see China suffering the exact same fate as the Soviet Union. A completely failed collapsed state due to an arms race. So make your arms race to that bag of 行走公方爆米花，因为事情真的很大条咯。Let's see if we can get it. 妈的。Fun fact, and this just might shock you, I am not a military expert. No. I'm just a DJ with a camera and a really big ass nose to sniff out and dig data. And what I'm bringing you today is the result of 2 days of research. So if there are any errors, go a little easy on me, okay? But on the off chance that I'm actually right about this, then the Golden Dome could be as big as last century's Manhattan Project and completely change the battlefield and the world as we know it.
In the campaign, I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we have officially selected an architecture for this state-of-the-art system that will deploy next-generation technologies across the land, sea, and space, including space-based sensors and interceptors. Canada has called us and they want to be a part of it, so we'll be talking to them. They want to have protection also. This design for the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years.
Now here, the Trump administration made a very clever statement, saying that this is a golden shield, all used to protect America, because you know, there are bad guys. Look, I'll draw it for you. A dome, used for protection. And it's so tight, not even Diddy himself could penetrate it.
Tight, yeah!
As you're aware, our adversaries have become very capable and very intent on holding the homeland at risk. While we have been focused on keeping the peace overseas, our adversaries have been quickly modernizing their nuclear forces, building out ballistic missiles capable of hosting multiple warheads, building out hypersonic missiles capable of attacking the United States within an hour and traveling at 6,000 miles an hour, building cruise missiles that can navigate around our radar and our defenses, building submarines that can sneak up on our shores, and worse yet, building space weapons. It is time that we change that equation and start doubling down on the protection of the homeland.
Now, when talking about hypersonic missiles and developing space weapons, what this general is really talking about is
China, because China.
I'm also pleased to report that the One Big Beautiful Bill will include $25 billion for the Golden Dome to help construction get underway. That's the initial sort of a down deposit. And we have probably, you're talking about, General, we're talking about $175 billion total cost of this when it's completed.
And here's one thing you need to know. The Manhattan Project back then, in today's currency value, equals 72 billion US dollars. And this Golden Dome project will be at least $2 billion.
Holy moly.
Now, to be real, when I first saw this news, I pretty much ignored it, because I thought at the time that the US budget wouldn't go for such a ridiculously massive project. Trump was just probably trying to talk shit and scare China again.
The bill is passed.
It was a race to the finish as House Republicans advanced President Trump's signature legislation before the Memorial Day recess.
This one big beautiful bill is the most consequential legislation that any party has ever passed.
This is one big, ugly bill.
The House cleared the massive package with only 1 vote to spare.
That's right, the budget for Trump's Golden Dome project passed unanimously. Now, at first look, you might think it's not that big a deal, but actually, I thought the exact same thing initially, but I was completely wrong, because the first phase of this Golden Dome project could very well be the most important military budget of this entire century. So, you know what it is, and I ain't throwing no popcorn, because this is not a laughing matter. 真的是代际大条。 So before you can begin to understand the Golden Dome, you first need to understand America's biggest, most current threat, China's hypersonic missiles and exactly how they work.
Ballistic missiles have 4 phases. There's the boost phase, there's the post-boost phase, which is usually where the missile's engines separate. There's the mid-course phase, where the missile is essentially in parabolic flight, but it might do some corrections. I think it also takes fixes on star positions to figure out where it is in space to kind of correct itself where it's going. And then there's the terminal phase, where it re-enters the atmosphere to actually go after the target. The absolute best time to go after a missile is in the boost phase, because that's when the engine's hot. You can see it. Once it goes post-boost and mid-course, it is a lot harder to hit. Now, once it re-enters, detection gets easier because it heats up, but you don't have a lot of time, like less than a minute. And if you have multiple warheads or decoys, your problem just multiplied, because like the Patriot going after broken up Scud missiles, what are you supposed to target?
Simply put, the Golden Dome's goal is to destroy missiles immediately after they launch. And there's one thing you need to keep in mind. Most countries with nuclear weapons deliver their nuclear warheads via missiles. In other words, if the Golden Dome can really pull this off, destroying missiles within Chinese territory right when China launches them, then China's nuclear warheads would be completely useless. Now, in order to achieve the effect of making Chinese nuclear missiles impotent, you're gonna need 2 things. First, and most important, is the eye that monitors 24/7 to see when missiles are launching around the world.
In the fall of 2009, a Delta II rocket launched off Florida's east coast carrying 2 Missile Defense Agency Space Tracking and Surveillance System, or STSS, demonstration satellites. Designed to last 4 years, the STSS satellites operated for over 12 years. Demonstrating birth-to-death ballistic missile tracking and missile defense system fire control quality data as a testbed to study new ways to improve ballistic missile tracking from space. Today, STSS data informs the development of future missile defense sensor capabilities, such as those on board the Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor, or HBTSS.
The HBTSS. This satellite is specifically designed to find CCP's hypersonic missiles, and it completed its initial testing back in June 2024.
How do ballistic missiles differ from hypersonic missile threats? Ballistic missiles fly a predictable path and spend most of the time in space. Hypersonic glide vehicles, or HGVs, which can fly in excess of 3,800 miles per hour, can change direction and altitude and vary their speed in flight within the atmosphere, posing a severe challenge to today's missile defense system. Powerful radars on Earth can view in-flight objects only as far as the horizon allows, and only within specific corridors. A global constellation of HBTSS tracking satellites will ensure continuous access to missile threats from launch to re-entry, while providing fire control tracking to the missile defense system.
So now we have the HBTSS that can see missiles with changing trajectories, but it's limited. I mean, it can only see infrared, right?
Synthetic aperture radar tries to get high resolution with a small antenna by moving that antenna over long distances and combining all the viewpoints into a single radar image with an effective aperture that's much larger, using the motion of that antenna to create a larger aperture. So synthetic aperture radar systems fly over terrain either on an aircraft or on satellites, and they synthesize radar responses to create detailed images.
The Synthetic Aperture Radar Satellite, aka SAR. This thing can be used to map out whether there are missile silos on the ground or where missile launcher vehicles are.
So this is a really useful tool for analyzing the surface. It's quite common to see false color images in SAR that use one channel for horizontal, one for vertical, and one for where the polarization was changed. And it's a really good analog for RGB color. So using all of this together now, there is a wealth of information to be gleaned from radar images. For example, we saw under the clouds of Venus to finally reveal the terrain. Cassini had a radar and it used it to identify hydrocarbon lakes on the surface of Titan. On Earth, we've seen archaeological sites that were buried under sand. They've been found now thanks to subsurface reflections. We can watch the land around volcanoes as it rises and falls by millimeters as lava moves around under the ground.
So now the Golden Dome can see infrared, terrain, and even colors. So how exactly do you achieve this 24-hour monitoring?
Satellites.
Lots of satellites.
And luckily for America, they have Elon Musk's Starlink. And they're going to need to deploy 1,200 of each type of satellite to achieve their 24-hour monitoring of the world in real time. Now, I know what you might be thinking, hey, but here's the thing, SpaceX deployed 2,400 Starlink satellites in 28 months, and as of right now, there are currently over 6,000 Starlink satellites in space. And up to this point, if you're like me and play games, then you should know what fog of war means. You cannot know enemy troops' movements in real time. But with Golden Dome's eyes, the SAR can let US forces know the terrain of every battlefield location, where vehicles are deployed, and the HBTSS can know where artillery positions are or where missiles are being launched in real time.
Holy moly.
Now, in the game world, removing the fog of war is straight up cheating, yo. But in the real world, it means pay to win. Super awesome.
Tight, yeah!
So now you know that the Golden Dome has golden eyes. Next up, we're gonna look at the most interesting part, the golden hands. And that's when you'll begin to understand that the Golden Dome is not for defense. Unless you want to twist it and say that the best defense is a good offense, in which case, for China and everyone else, 真的是大起大掉咯。Now, before we get to how the Golden Dome's hands can shoot down ascending missiles, there are two more things you need to know. Geostationary Earth orbit and low Earth orbit, aka GEO and LEO. The Golden Dome's space-based missile interceptors are to be placed inside LEO, but LEO has a disadvantage. Satellites must move really fast, orbiting Earth once every 90 minutes to avoid falling to the ground.
But because these things are orbiting, even if you set up that orbital path with a specific launch site in mind, they're going to spend the vast majority of their time not in a launch position. The main solution to that problem is to put up lots and lots of interceptors, so at any given time, one's going to be in position to take the shot. That kind of approach makes these systems inherently global, and it also likely makes them very resource intensive. In their report, the CBO looked at a number of scenarios relating to systems designed to counter 1 or 2 ICBMs being launched by North Korea in an attack on the United States, with the smallest constellation being modelled to counter that threat being 1,000 space-based interceptors. I believe that modelling also assumed 0 seconds of decision time, so as soon as the system was able to detect and get a solution to intercept a missile, an interceptor was immediately tasked. No umming and ahhing, no hesitation, which obviously meant there was a little bit more leeway in terms of optimum positioning. Introduced just a 30-second delay to determine whether or not a missile was a threat and should be shot down, and the number of required interceptors in the system doubled to 2,000.
2,000 interceptors are just for dealing with North Korea's 2 missiles. Now, China has about 500 missile silos, so wouldn't that require over 1 million interceptors? This is near impossible to execute.
It's for more and more coverage at any particular point, but again, the options for the attacker are just so much cheaper than the options for the defender that against a peer adversary, it's not clear how you make this concept an economic winner. The challenge is to get that near 100% effectiveness that President Trump talked about. The defender needs to maintain perfect coverage, whereas the attacker just needs to poke a hole in it. Even if you could overcome all of those countermeasures though, there's still a risk your opponent would find some other way to deliver strategic nuclear weapons. Keep many of your cities at risk and maintain their deterrent that way. Golden Dome, for example, wouldn't do anything against a nuclear-powered underwater drone sailing into the harbour of a major American city and setting off a large nuclear warhead, which is a system the Russians have already developed. It's called Poseidon, which arguably highlights a bit of the irony of the current situation.
In a nutshell, the Golden Dome cannot destroy missiles during their launch phase, because missile ascent takes about 3 to 5 minutes. You can't deploy a GEO 36,000 kilometers away just because you want to keep interceptors fixed above China. So that means you can only deploy a LEO, which orbits Earth every 90 minutes. But this requires a shit ton of interceptors to achieve 24-hour interception capability.
I'd blow up the pipes, I'd blow up the I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left.
But this time, Trump's budget includes developing satellite-mounted missile interceptors. And unless Space Force has already begun to figure out a solution, I think the Golden Dome is not a space-based missile defense system at all. It's most likely a space-based missile weapon system.
With the goal of keeping Americans safe with this, can you talk about the timeline? How long will this take to complete?
We think it's going to be about a little bit less than 3 years, and we'll have a big phase-in very early. You know, we're starting immediately with $25 billion. It'll cost about $175 billion completed. But we think in 2.5 to 3 years.
2.5 to 3 years means from the end of 2026 to the end of 2027. And we all know what's happening in 2027. So do you still believe this system that can see through the fog of war and launch missiles from space is really all just for defense?
Orbital bombardment as a broad concept is fairly simple to understand. Take a weapon system into space, point it at Earth, and launch away. If you want to bring devastation on your geopolitical rival, orbital bombardment seems to offer a number of advantages. You can get a satellite much closer to an enemy nation than your missile silos. You can launch missiles that existing missile defense systems would have a hard time detecting before it's too late. And if you want to make threats instead of making war, you can simply position your orbital bombardment satellite above an enemy nation and just wait for them to cave.
Where the Manhattan Project of last century was about weapons of mass destruction that needed to be delivered by missiles or aircraft to achieve their purpose, making them susceptible to being intercepted by air defense systems, the Golden Dome of this century is a real-time global battle monitoring orbital strike system, and no air defense system can stop it. This means the USA will now possess a weapon more powerful than nuclear weapons. This ain't no goddamn dome, this is a goddamn spear.
I'm gonna bomb the shit out of them. It's true.
所谓的金色穹顶计划旨在构建不受任何约束的全球性、多层次、多领域导弹防御系统。该计划公然提出大幅增加外空作战手段，包括研发、部署轨道拦截系统，具有浓厚的进攻性色彩，违反外空条约倡导的和平利用原则，将加剧外空战场化和军备竞赛风险，动摇国际安全与军控体系。
China launched 600 satellites in the past 3 years, whereas SpaceX launched 7,000 satellites in the past 3 years. If China really wants to participate in the space arms race, it will be 超级难 as fuck. And now that the US is decoupling from China in trade, China could more easily be prone to collapse in the space arms race, just like the Soviet Union.
When you first announced this idea, critics said it would be prohibitively expensive, potentially ineffective, and could trigger an arms race in space. What do you say to those critics about that?
Well, they're wrong. It's about as close to perfect as you can have in terms of real production. I told you Canada wants to be a part of it, which be, fairly small expansion, but we'll work with them on pricing. We'll be dealing with them on pricing. They know about it very much. They've asked to be a part of it, actually. They've asked us to be a part of it. I think it's something that is great if you can afford to do it.
Now, at the moment, Taiwan is in direct negotiations with the USA. And if I were them, I'd be fighting just like Canada for the opportunity to contribute and join the Golden Dome global domination system, giving them access to the latest and greatest in golden technology so that when shit goes down in 2027, when they face the PLA, every single Taiwanese soldier will have a cheat code.
Game over, bitches.
But that's just me. I could be wrong. What do you guys think? Leave a comment down below. Remember to keep it civil or I will ban your ass. And I will see you on the flip side after you like, comment, and subscribe and share with your friends. Peace.